Hi, I'm Pam, and this is my monthly update video letting you know everything that I was up to in the month of February. So February was a short month that didn't feel all that short. I have a couple podcasts to talk about. First of all, there was a new episode of Point and Drink Adventure with myself and my friend Michelle. We had an episode where we drank and talked about dirty martinis, which is something that I don't drink very often, but mostly I just like them because I like olives. We also talked about a ton of movies on that episode. You can check it out on either your podcast app of choice or over on the Point and Drink Adventure YouTube channel. We should also have a new episode coming up sometime probably in the next week. I also guested on someone else's podcast. I was on the Split Up podcast with my friends Dylan and Mook, and Split Up is a horror podcast. Each episode generally has a theme, and each of the hosts brings a movie that fits that theme, and they sort of discuss it. They both know a lot about horror movies, so they also really like to go on tangents. So you're going to learn a whole lot if you listen to that podcast. The episode that I was on, we covered my favorite subgenre of horror, which is space and sci-fi horror. And I got to talk about one of my favorite horror movies, which is Event Horizon. I had a lot of fun talking about that one, especially just like the visuals of that movie. That's sort of one of my favorite things about it. We also talked about Pandorum, which is not one of my favorite horror movies, but that was a good discussion as well. And you can check out the Split Up podcast on any podcast app, and I will leave a link to it in the description below. Now on to pickups, and while I'm used to skipping the pickup section since I'm kind of done with the whole game collecting thing, I do have some game-related things to show off. First of all, I upgraded my video card in my computer, which has been sort of a long time coming. I don't play anything that graphically intense, but my card was a fairly old one. I was streaming a few weeks back. It wasn't even, I didn't think, that graphically intense of a game. It was like a 2.5D game called Candle Night. It was just a demo, and my frame rate on my stream just like turned into a slideshow, and I got really upset about that. And the very next morning, as soon as Canada Computers opened, I went down there. I said, give me a new graphics card and a new power supply, since I would need one of those as well. I didn't go for like the new super expensive stuff, but I just got a GeForce 3070, which so far is suiting my needs just fine. I'm also very proud of myself because I installed it and the new power supply myself. I've never done my own computer building stuff, so I was happy to have not broken anything and to have everything up and working now. It does seem much better, especially for streaming. No longer does my just like start screen take up like a significant portion of my processing power. So yeah, that was really good. Also, another thing is that I've been wanting for many years to get a second tattoo, and I've really wanted to get a gaming tattoo, but I've just sort of like hummed and hawed and like, well, what game and what would I get? And so many of the ideas were like, okay, my favorite games like Planescape Torment, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, XCOM, but none of the imagery was really giving me an idea of something that I wanted to have on my body. So I decided to go with Hollow Knight and the Wayward Compass, which is, first of all, my favorite charm in that game, never without it. Also, personally, I tend to get lost, so a compass is a pretty good idea for me, even though this one has no cardinal directions on it, which I kind of like what that says too. But I got, how am I gonna show this to you? Oh no. I will show you a picture since it's probably more difficult to see here. But yeah, I just got the Wayward Compass here with a sort of like watercolor splash around it. I'm super happy with it. It's been, I think 4 weeks now, so it's fully healed. 4 weeks? Yeah, 4 weeks. It's fully healed. I'm going to just have a couple tiny little things touched up in a few weeks. But yeah, finally got my second tattoo, and Hollow Knight seemed like a good game to do it with, even though it's sort of a newer favorite compared to something like Planescape Torment. I've put enough hours into that game that I'm happy with having it etched into my skin. And I also picked up some new video game vinyl. part of me was just kind of feeling left out. Michelle always has so many vinyl to show off during our podcast episodes, and I haven't had anything for a while. So I did a little shopping and found a few things that I wanted to have physical. The first one, this was kind of a whim as I was looking for other things, but it is the Norwood Suite. I actually didn't even know that the soundtrack to this was on vinyl. This game is by Cosmo D, who's made a few other things, Tales from Off-Peak City. There's a new one that just came out last year that I haven't had the chance to get to. And they're kind of surreal games where you wander around in first person. This particular one, you're in a hotel that's full of mysteries, you're talking to strange people, you're discovering strange things, and the soundtrack is sort of like a electronic jazzy soundtrack, which I really enjoy, so I figured I would pick this one up. The next one is actually, I believe, the only vinyl I've ever purchased for a game that I have not played. Usually I only purchase the soundtracks if I've actually played the game. But this is Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, and the soundtrack is by Ryan Henwood, who I think is from Toronto, and I think the game was made in Toronto as well. It is a co-op 1 to 4 player couch co-op game where you're manning a spaceship with your friends. And now I really need to actually play it at some point that I have the soundtrack, but I have listened to the soundtrack and it's just like this amazing electronic soundtrack that just makes me want to get up and dance around my apartment. So I decided to go with this. Also, I love the cover. I think it's beautiful. And I think the records themselves are blue and pink. The Norwood Suite one, I'm pretty sure was just black. Yeah, so just really nice. It sort of shows these little guys going around using their spaceship. Actually, let me just double check the Norwood Suite. Actually, I think it might be a color in color one. It comes with an art print, which is like, okay. But oh yeah, it is blue. Here's the Norwood Suite one, and that kind of gives you a taste of what the art is like in the game. It's very strange art, but yeah. And the last thing is something that I have sort of had an eye out for a long time. It was very hard to come by for a while, but I believe there was a repress last year sometime. It is the Firewatch soundtrack by Chris Remo. Firewatch is a beautiful game, just a nice little walking simulator where you go to be a fire watchtower person to kind of get away from your life and just experience the summer, what's going on. It's a little bit mysterious. You sort of build a relationship with someone in another tower, and it's kind of about how life doesn't always go the way you want it to, but it's a really good soundtrack, sort of a lot of like acoustics and things, acoustic guitar and things like that. So very happy to finally have this one in the collection. And now onto the games that I've been playing. I still feel like I haven't been playing, or at least I haven't been finishing as many games as I was last year. I think at this time I've beaten 10 games so far this year, which is pretty low for me, honestly, but that's okay. Also, I've been playing a lot of co-op games. So some things that I actually did finish in February. The first thing was Grime, which is a Metroidvania that came out about a little over a year ago, and then just got a big expansion in December. I've been playing through it. I had gotten a little bit stuck at a really difficult boss, but I went through and I finally beat the game. I'm actually midway through a script to review it, so I'm not going to have a whole lot to say about it right now. You'll have to wait for the review, but overall, thumbs up from me. It's a really nice game, and I really, really love the art style. I also played through a game called The Suicide of Rachel Foster, and this is a short walking simulator type game. You play a woman who goes back to the hotel that she grew up in before her family split apart because her father has just died. And it was bad. It was a bad game on multiple levels. I'm gonna spoil a little bit about this, but the reason that she was sort of hadn't seen her father is that her father, it's presented as her father had an affair and it broke up the family. And so she just has to go to the hotel to sort of clean it out, make sure everything's okay, and then it can be sold. And as she's there, she's sort of finding things out, remembering things, and gameplay-wise, it's just really dull. I feel like walking simulators have to give you a little more, especially since What Remains of Edith Finch, which changed up gameplay all the time, had great way of like presenting different stories and sort of different ways of controlling what you were doing and different visuals. This was just a very simple, like, walk around this hotel back and forth, walk very slowly, listen to her talking to someone on the walkie-talkie. So there just wasn't that much interesting to it. But then you get to the end of the game and you find out earlier, that the affair that her father had was with her 16-year-old friend. And it's never really addressed that, hey, that's bad. And just the whole time this main character is like, oh man, I hate my friend. She ruined my family. It's like, did she ruin your family, or was that your father grooming and doing inappropriate things? So it was just a very strange take on that whole thing. There was also a whole bunch of technical difficulties. The game sort of soft locked on me a number of times, and when that happens, it like brings you right back to the start of the chapter, so I had to like replay things, and it just overall wasn't very good. Don't recommend it. The next game that I played, I enjoyed much better, and it's called 10 Dates, which is the latest by Wales Interactive, who makes FMV games. This one came out on Valentine's Day. I actually ended up streaming it for a couple hours on Valentine's Day. And this is basically an FMV kind of dating simulator type thing. You have a choice between two different characters. They're best friends, and one of them signs them up for a speed dating night. So depending on who you choose, you get 5 different speed dates, and you sort of talk to the people, and it's just, selecting your responses to everyone, sort of all different people to talk to. And it was really well done. Like the acting was really great. The performances, the sort of chemistry between the actors was very believable. Depending on your responses, things can go very well or very poorly. I had a couple of my speed dates go downhill almost immediately, to the point where they were just taking their phones out of their pockets and looking at it rather than talking to me. Or we had people who were like, okay, let's exchange numbers or social media info, because apparently that's what the kids do these days. And then, maybe you can get a follow-up date. So after these 5 dates, then you have sort of like a little reconvening with your friend, and they're like, well, who are you gonna date? And then you can pick 2 people that you wanna go on a second date with. And then after those, you can maybe get a 3rd date to get to sort of the end of the path and hopefully find a match with one of the people. I played through it as both the woman and the man in the story. I did get a happy ending with one of them. One, right at the very end, I found out I had screwed up right at the very beginning, and it didn't work out. But overall, I really enjoyed it. After the stream, I've played it a bit on my own to just go through a couple of the different paths. And yeah, if you like FMV, those sort of like choose your own adventure games, I thought this was a really great one. Now onto the co-op games, which is most of what I played. On my 4-people co-op night, we played through Warhammer Vermintide 2, which is just a 4-player sort of first-person action game. I don't really know anything about the Warhammer universe, but you're fighting giant rats, and you have a choice between 5 different characters to play as. Sort of each person has to play a different character with different classes. I ended up playing like a mage, a pyromancer, and I thought that was a lot of fun. The range combat is good. Also, the melee combat is like good and satisfying and crunchy feeling. The environments are very nice. It really changes things up from stage to stage. I find in a lot of these kind of 4-player action-y games, things can get a little bit samey, but there was just a lot of different environments here. In terms of the gameplay, It's mostly combat focused. There are some collectibles and things to find. I could have used maybe a couple more puzzly elements in it, but the gameplay on its own was good enough to keep everyone's attention, and everyone who played really enjoyed it. We played through the main campaign, and then there was a bunch of DLCs that we had access to, so we played through all of those missions, and overall it was really good. Again, as with most of these multiplayer games, probably not something I would want to play through solo. Wouldn't keep my attention really, but with 4 people, either, on voice chat and stuff, it's a lot of fun to play. So yeah, if you're looking for something, kind of on the Left 4 Dead level, Warhammer Vermintide 2 was really good. Another game I played that was a replay for me is Kingdom 2 Crowns, which is a game I'm sure I've talked about multiple times on this channel. It's a very simple base building survival game, beautiful pixel art. You play a king or a queen and you just sort of build up a base around you with walls and archers and workers, and then every night you get attacked by these monsters. So you have to make sure that your defenses are good enough, and you sort of explore this island around you, building up your fort, getting resources, and trying to survive. And I put so much time into that, but Kingdom 2 Crowns specifically is 2 crowns because you can play with 2 people, either online or couch co-op, but I've never played it co-op. So recently, they just put out new challenge islands, which are sort of a randomized island where you get a randomized power and a randomized mount. And so I played that co-op, which was a lot of fun. It's just one of my favorite chill games. Like, it's so nice to just lean back and kind of relax, even though it is stressful when the greed are attacking and they're tearing down your walls and you don't know if they're gonna get you and get your crown. But it's just a really cool, chill experience, and co-op, it was a lot of fun. It was nice to have one person on one side of the camp and one person on the other, so you could keep an eye on everything. In order to beat it, we needed to defeat all of the greed while keeping our little doggies safe, which we managed to do, which is amazing because usually my dog always gets stolen by the greed. But yeah, that was fun. The only problem I had with it was that there wasn't really an ending. Even though we destroyed all the greed, there was no, you win screen. This is how many archers you did. This is how many days it took you. It was just kind of kept going without saying good job, you can turn the game off now. So I wish there was something an achievement of something at the end to sort of cap it off. But it's just, I love the game, and it's a cool new mode if you want a little bit more randomness. Another co-op game I played was It Takes Two, and I'm completely blanking on the name of the developer here. It's the same ones who made Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons and A Way Out. And this is a co-op only game. So you can play online, you can play couch co-op, but it's about a couple who have decided to get a divorce. They tell their child about it, and their child wishes really hard, and the parents turn into little toys and have to make their way through the giant house and figure out how to get their human bodies back and get back to their daughter. The story's honestly kind of silly, and there's a character in it who's a love doctor therapist who's a little bit annoying, and some of the messaging in the game is a little questionable for me, but the gameplay is really, really fun. Each of the characters has their own ability, and every time you go to a new world, the abilities change, so the gameplay keeps on changing up, so nothing ever gets too stale. There's a lot of really cool puzzles, there's some combat, there's some platforming. It's really good, I thought. A lot of fun, maybe bordering on a little bit too long, but overall I had a lot of fun with it. It also had a lot of incredible tonal shifts. Sometimes it's pretty funny and lighthearted, and then all of a sudden you're torturing your daughter's toys. So that was a little jarring sometimes, but I can't say I didn't appreciate it. But It Takes Two was really good. I also really liked A Way Out. If you have someone that you want to play a game with, this is a really good one. I think it took around, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 hours, but I definitely enjoyed the whole time through it. And the last co-op game I played is called We Were Here, and this is the first in a series of 4 games, I believe. And these are only online co-op. You cannot play these couch co-op because it's entirely a game about communication. So you play 2 explorers or something. You go into this church-ish building. You end up separated, but you get walkie-talkies so you can talk to each other. And generally one person will go around and they'll find, symbols on the wall, and then the other person will have a book that they can look up to find out what the symbols mean. And you just have to communicate back and forth in order to solve the puzzles from different places. You're like never in the same room physically, your characters. And it was pretty fun. This was a really quick one. This is free on Steam. I think it took less than an hour and a half to beat it. And some of the puzzles are interesting. Again, it's mostly about communication more than actual puzzle solving. There were some timed puzzles, which I didn't think really were necessary. Like the second room I went into started filling with water and I drowned, and you just go back and you solve the puzzle before and then you get back to the puzzle, and I just didn't really feel the time element added anything. I mean, if you had been timed the whole time for, leaderboards at the end or something, then all right, but the whole like, oh, you're gonna die if you don't solve this in time, could have done without it. But overall, it was good. I liked the puzzles. They were occasionally a little bit janky, but from what I've heard from other friends who have played through this series, it kind of gets better with every game. So I'm definitely looking forward to the second one, which I think is called We Were Here 2, or We Were Here Together, one of those. But yeah, another one. If you have a co-op buddy online that you want to play with, then you can communicate well together. It's a pretty fun game. Lastly, just going to talk about one game that I retired. It's called Mr. Prepper. I really like sort of those survival-y base building crafting type games. Mr. Prepper sounded like one of those, but as it turned out, I really didn't like the UI. You just play a guy in a neighborhood who's prepping for a disaster. The disaster hasn't actually happened yet. I assume it will at some point in the game, but I didn't get there. And he's just, destroying his furniture so that he can get wood to build his underground bunker, and you have to manage his sleep and his food. And I just found the UI and everything a little awkward to use, and I didn't really like controlling the guy, so I put it down after not too long, maybe an hour of gameplay. It just wasn't really doing it for me. I think after I played through this war of mine a couple months ago, actually, was that February too? I'm not talking about that now. It just, didn't seem like nearly as good of a game, and I was kind of looking for that kind of experience. But yeah, Mr. Prepper didn't really do it for me. All right, so that's all of my updates for February. Leave me a comment, let me know what you've been playing, if you got any interesting new pickups, if you have any recommendations for me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.